welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. It's been just over a month since the dead began to wake up and devour the living. Seems like a lot longer now. Certainly, it's only recently that you stopped moving. The urban areas were the worst hit, but inside of those, the real death traps were the hospitals. You know, it's natural human instinct that when you're injured, as soon as you gain so much as a sprain, let alone a bite from a zombie, you head straight towards the hospital. You trust that that is the area you can go to receive aid. It's built up in our culture now. Pretty much every country you could possibly live in, you will go to the hospital because that is where you will be made better. You'll be given medicine, you'll be given treatment, you'll be told everything is going to be all right. Those were the worst places to go when the outbreak began. Not just the dead from within the hospital waking up and taking their hunger out on the staff and anyone who happened to be unfortunate enough to be sedated and therefore unable to fight back. Anyone who was injured that was going there, whether they were bitten or whether they were suffering a sprain or a broken bone, so many people infirm, unable to fight back properly, so many people too desperate and too unsure, too confused to go anywhere else. Where would be safer? So many people thought. There was panic. No one was thinking about it, and just like that, in so many cities, the hospitals became these nests for zombies, just spawning and spawning and spawning. And so, despite government warnings to the contrary, people began to flee to the rural areas, to the countryside. After all, if the cities were unsafe, the country must be a lot better. And for a short time that was true, but when resources began to grow low, and they began to grow low so very swiftly, it wasn't long before survivors began to turn on one another. A month doesn't seem like a long time, but a month when the stores have been looted, when fuel is not being restocked at gas stations, when healthcare is a luxury that very few people can obtain, a month becomes a very long time. Now, you've been holed up in this location for a little while now, this old schoolhouse built pre-war, built to last, on the side of a hill. You've got a good view of the local community. Well, it would be good, were not largely burnt out. You've not seen any survivors down there for at least a week. You've had to turn away those few who have hammered on the doors. You've only got one way in, one way out. You've boarded up the windows. There's a constant watch on the door. But they always bring zombies with them. Zombies are unerringly sniffing out the living. You're not even sure how they do this tracking, but you do know one bite's all it needs, one bite, maybe even one scratch. Infection spreads so quickly when there's nothing you can do to stop it. You've holed up for a while, but yes, the resources are growing low. There's so many of you in the schoolhouse. So many of you had the same idea. To go here, this place, high ground, stone walls. But resources are growing low. People are getting agitated. People are worrying about their relatives, about themselves. You wake up. The man on watch, he's gone. He left the door open. Zombies have got in. A few of your number have been mauled, have been bitten. Perhaps it's time to move on. But where do you move to when you may be the only humans remaining? The only living remaining. This is Outbreak Undead, a new role-playing game review. I admit it's been a while since I've done one of those little stories. It's been a while since I've done a review, and I've been looking forward to it. I would be lying if I said I was not. Now, Outbreak Undead is a game by Hunters, Christopher de la Rosa. It was released in 2010, and it is a zombie role-playing game. A role-playing game in which you play survivors in a zombie apocalypse. The game is built so that you actually play versions of yourself in the zombie apocalypse. There are enough rules to facilitate this with very little difficulty, although there are plenty of possibilities to play within templates of different professions, and to allocate yourself more points if you want to play sort of hard-bitten, hard-boiled SWAT team survivor, or less points if you want a fast-paced, quick death-based game. But either way, it's a game that gives you all the options you could need playing in a zombie game. Now, is it a game I would recommend? This is very early doors in the review to be saying this. Well, it really depends what you're looking for. I often find zombie games are much of a muchness. This is why it's taken me so long to actually get around to reviewing this game. It's difficult to make a role-playing game about zombies unique without detracting from the zombie mythology that we've all come to know and love. That Romero mythology, that Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and going on to other mediums like Resident Evil, Left 4 Dead, 28 Days Later, The Walking Dead, World War Z, and so on. These are the zombie myths we know and love, so if you have a game that veers too wildly off of that, you might start to question, well, hang on, I wanted to buy a zombie game here, I wanted to play a zombie game, I didn't want to play a game in which zombies were, I don't know, running, but I don't actually have a problem with that necessarily, but those aren't Romero zombies, of course, and that does become a very different game when your predators can actually pursue you at speed. Anyhow, Outbreak Undead, does it offer something different? No, it does not offer anything different to the standard zombie tropes. Is that a bad thing? No, because you wouldn't have bought it if you wanted something different, I would say. Does it make for an easy read? Not particularly. It isn't a game that's full of setting. It's not a game that has a deluxe world all written up with loving detail. But is it a book that contains rules for every single occasion, nearly 100 pages worth of equipment, and plenty of GM hints and missions in the back? Yes, it does have that. This book numbers about 450 pages. It's a hefty tome. A hefty tome for a book that does not contain any real setting information. So on to the content of the book itself. Now, this book is laid out across 9 chapters. There is a bit of an encyclopedic feel to it, a bit of a player's handbook feel to it, maybe a Call of Cthulhu core rulebook feel, or something else, GURPS perhaps. It is designed so that you can play with the rules that are all-encompassing and very much interwoven into this game. This is what the game is. It's a big set of rules that are very good, but not necessarily the easiest thing to wrap one's head around on first reading. And this isn't the sort of thing you're going to read from beginning to end in one sitting, because it's not a game with any fiction in particularly, except for a few scant notes spread throughout the book. Chapter 1 is an about section. It covers the very basic mechanics. It's a percentile-based system, so in other words you're trying to score underneath whatever stat you have, whatever your percentage rating is in, for instance, strength. So far, so basic role-playing. However, the game does have an additional feature which is very similar to Call of Cthulhu 7th edition, in that if, let's say, your strength is rated at 50% and you rolled a 20% on your 2d10, your two 10-sided dice, then you will have succeeded by 3 tiers. So, so one tier would have been 40%, 2 tiers 30%, 3 tiers 20%, and each tier you succeed by makes the success more dynamic, more exciting, more successful. Likewise, there's the capacity to add more difficulty. If, for instance, you're tied up, if, for instance, you're wounded, a percentage penalty may be applied to the attribute that you actually have the percentage rating in, by 5% increments. So, for instance, let's say you do have a sprained ankle, that could be seen as a tier 2 penalty. So while you may normally have 50% in strength, it actually goes down to 40 for the purposes of this challenge, in which you're trying to run away from a pursuer. So it's a very basic system in that regard, but it does the job quite nicely. And Chapter 2 details the spew system, as it's called. It's called the spew system because there's 4 attributes in this game: strength, perception, empathy, and willpower, of which you get around 120 points to spread between them, 120 in a standard game. And the game itself is built so that you're playing versions of yourself. That's quite an important facet of Outbreak Undead, but you don't have to, because the book does actually have rules for creating templates. There are lots of templates listed in the medical professional, the SWAT team member, and so on, who may get more points than the average survivor, and may get additional skills in certain areas. And the spew system advocates a roughly balanced spread of 120 points, so you could put 30 points in strength, perception, empathy, and so you're left with your last 30 that you put into willpower. And if you decide to not buy any skills later on in the character creation process, you can put more points into your attributes as well. Most characters are given 5 tiers of skills. This is detailed in Chapter 3 at the beginning of character creation, and increasing tiers mean you are increasingly trained, well trained in that skill. There is a very wide range, very broad range of skills in this game, so pick and choose them as you will. You don't have to, of course, you don't have to use them. You can sacrifice them to have more points into your attributes. There's also your melee attack rules, range attack rules. Melee attack is affected by your strength, by your perception, by your willpower. For every 5 points you have in strength, your melee rating goes up. For every 10 points you have in perception and willpower, your melee attack rating goes up. So obviously strength is the core there for melee attacks, and range attacks is similar, but it's perception, strength and willpower. So perception is the 5 points and strength and willpower are the 10 pointers. You also gain a what is the term? Let's see. Bite resistance, which is based on your perception, on half of your perception, and on the clothing that you're wearing. So how well can you resist a zombie's bite? So basically 1 bite does not necessarily mean you're dead, and you get the increasing bonus of being able to resist toxicity as time goes on, along with a health rating that you would be foolish not to take care of. As I say, Chapter 3 goes into all the skills, your 5 tiers of which go into character creation, and you get 40 odd pages of skills and handicaps in this game, so it does not scrimp on character customization. You can make whatever character you like for this game. Now, where this game starts to get interesting for my money is in the turn order. Turns are split between phases. There's 6 phases that range from, and I will in fact read this from the book. Let's see. So they range from the surprise phase, that's what the first phase of a turn, at which point you have intent, at which point every single player declares their character's intent. Everyone is essentially going at the same time. You then do your checks, you make your rolls to see whether you will succeed, and then you have resolutions for every single character. You then resolve grapple checks if anyone's grappling with a zombie or another human, and then you resolve damage as a result of that. I like that. It seems a bit cumbersome, it seems a bit long-winded, but I like a system that encourages everyone to go at the same time. It means that you're not waiting to be the last in line based on initiative. There's some nice rules in the turn chapter about how movement rates can affect various stats, for instance your perception. So for instance if you're laying prone, your perception is likely to be lessened if you are face down on the ground hiding from a zombie. It's exacting in its rules, but you don't actually have to be a rules lawyer to get on board with this. You can enjoy it, you can pick and choose whatever you like, as is always the case with things like encumbrance rules, the amount you can carry in a game. The formation rule is one that I particularly like, because it takes the idea of marching orders, which exist in most games, and basically says if you're at the front of the marching order, you get to act first, if the rest of the party's happy for you to do so. So rather than doing the good old-fashioned rolling initiative, if all of the group is making their way through the corridor of a hospital, for instance, as we mentioned one in the intro, you would actually have the person taking point reacting first, even if they are typically the slowest person in the group to react to these things. You'll notice there is no dexterity attribute, there is no reflexes attribute. It's based entirely on placing, but the game is not one that relies on battle mats or drawing maps out of your location. You can note these things down or you can describe them, and the game is perfectly happy with you to do so. Now, along with the turn order, zombie laws. The zombies chapter, chapter 5, is probably the second strongest chapter in this book, because you have various immutable and various mutable laws to do with zombies in this game. The immutable ones being the kinds of things where zombies will always gravitate towards attacking the living. They will never be deterred from that. The mutable ones being things like zombies being able to wield weapons and so on. And there's plenty of options given in this book for the zombie to be able to do various things, being built in various ways. You can very clearly see Left 4 Dead's influences, its dirty fingerprints, all over this book, because you have some zombie templates that are quite clearly boomers, witches and tanks, or titans as they're known in this one. I think it's grotesques, banshees and titans in this book, but there's plenty more than that. It's a very strong chapter because it gives you a nice amount of variety. This is where the book does start to veer away from, I suppose, the Romero style. All the zombies are the same, they're all mindless, shambling cannibals. Well, not even cannibals, that would imply they're eating their own. Flesh eaters, that's better. And I really like the chart in this chapter that actually details who would a zombie go for first. So a zombie first of all goes for anyone who is closest. Next it will go for whoever's in plain sight. Then it will go for whoever's within earshot, then it's whoever's downwind, and finally it will choose whoever is the least infected. There are some nice, some of the mutable rules include as well that zombies are less inclined to target those who are already infected with the zombie virus. So you could have a nice sort of Ripley in Alien 3 vibe going on here, where you send the person who's already infected out on point because they're less likely to be attacked. Chapter 6 details combat in exacting detail. Now, I will actually read out the combat example because I've noted down the page that it's on. It makes the combat in this system seem very simple indeed, and I can attest to it being so. And I couldn't find a better example than the one in the book. So Rick, appropriately, what with Walking Dead, fires one shot with a 12-gauge shotgun at a zombie at short range. The zombie has a defense of 3 because it is a former riot policeman and is wearing a helmet and protective gear. If Rick has a ranged attack of 10, then that means the chance of destroying the zombie with shooting is not 60% as previously indicated, but 45%, because the weapon's lethality, which is 50/20/5 depending on how close you are, is not 60% as previously indicated, but 45% because the weapon's lethality plus Rick's ranged attack minus the target's defense. In other words, weapon lethality 50 plus shooter's attack 10 minus defense value of 3. Each of those difficulty additions are 5%, so minus 15% equals 45. So let's go through that again. I've just read a whole load of text that's probably gone straight over your head. So, as he's at close range, the weapon has a lethality rating of 50. On top of that, Rick has a range attack rating of 10, so that would make 60% that he's got to score underneath. However, because the zombie is in riot gear, which is classed as a tier 3 difficulty or tier 3 defense, each of those values, each of those tiers counts for 5% off of the difficulty, or I suppose added to the difficulty. Therefore, while Rick did have a rating of 60, it's now been reduced to 45. He must score beneath 45 in order to hit with a shotgun. So you do need to have a basic knowledge of addition and subtraction in this game in order to get it to work, but it's pretty simple, and you've got a fairly hefty rules chapter on different elements of combat. Chapter 7, which we'll skirt over, covers various vehicles, attacking from vehicles, the speeds of different vehicles, which would be quite good for a sort of Road Warriors style game, which you could do, sort of on the move, outcasts and nomads type. Now the strongest chapter, nearing 100 pages in length, is the equipment. The amount of equipment in this game is staggering. For those who like shopping lists, those who like tables, those who like a wide inventory, this book is quite something. It contains rules for not just a multitude of weapons, but a multitude of basic utilitarian items, from padlocks to toasters and everything in between. Not just to be used as weapons, but basically what they can be used for, their intrinsic value in game, how much they weigh, how difficult they may be to find. Each thing is given a rarity rating, which is reminiscent of, I think it's 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, off the top of my head, that used to say whether a particular item was common, uncommon, or rare. Now that's going off the top of my head, I may be incorrect there. Equipment is something to behold with its over 100 pages, I have to be honest. And sorry, one thing I missed is in the zombie rules you also have zombie rules for various animals, such as apes and dogs and the like. And so if you decided to set a game in a zoo, the animals are not exempt from the virus. The final chapter, Chapter 9, is a GM's chapter. It has various missions in. It advocates that you can sort of make a mission have a different difficulty based on the 4 horses of the apocalypse. A white mission, a red mission, a black mission, and a pale mission. Pale, of course, being the worst, and having the more unusual and lethal variety of zombies within it, if you want to go that route. It advocates strongly having a mission structure to a game. So this is a game that benefits greatly from one-shots. It seems to be built for one-shots and modular style play. But you don't have to play it like that. It just sets everything out in missions, including the various scenarios that are listed in the back. There are over 10, maybe 15, I think, scenarios in this book that you could just pick up and play, that are set out in various difficulties that range from getting the hell out of Dodge to getting fuel for this vehicle to luring this Titan to this particular spot, maybe to a trap. There's so much you can do with it. Again, really feels very much Left 4 Dead. I know I've made that reference before, but that's the closest analogy I could find, really. The best part of the GM's chapter, however, is Stronghold, which goes back to character creation. It expects that at some point your characters are going to find a place, try and secure it, make a base for themselves. That becomes their stronghold, and a stronghold is given various stats depending on how well it's defended and the people making it up. It's given various stats. For instance, if you have a doctor there, it will have several points in medicine, or first aid rather. If there's a repairman there, it will have better structure and integrity. An electrician, you'll be able to get electricity, and so on. So if you're looking into a sort of base building role-playing game, it becomes quite a different game, because you're going to be looking for survivors of particular professions to make your base run, to make your stronghold run. That's a very interesting take on the zombie genre that I've not seen in a role-playing game before. Essentially, you've got to scout out for your sort of libertarian utopia, where you want only the best, only the people who will work, and only the people who will actually contribute to making the community strong. Or utilitarian would probably be fairer. The greatest strength of Outbreak Undead is its sheer volume, the sheer volume of information within it. Its greatest weaknesses, to me, are the lack of setting, which is fine for most people, because in a zombie game you often make your own. But it's also its layout. Now, I like a book that's laid out like a diary or a scrapbook as much as the next man. I love the clan books for Vampire the Requiem, for instance. But this book, being all in black and white and almost being written as if on a school journal, so let's see if I can find an example, means you have lots of lined paper with art that basically, when summed up, are Polaroids, black and white Polaroids that aren't terribly clear, and sketches in pencils or charcoal that look quite amateurish. I know that's the intent they're going for. See the sort of little fake paper clip there. it has a nice feel to it, but given that the book isn't written like a scrapbook, it's not written like a diary, it's not in character, it's quite... it seems more of an excuse for less high-quality production values. That is my honest feeling. I've turned more onto art as I've got more and more into role-playing games and seen a greater number of them. And this book suffers for its art. I appreciate what it might be going for, but that doesn't mean I necessarily like it, unfortunately. And that to me is its greatest weakness. But as far as system goes, as far as utility goes, as far as the actual resources within this book go, there is absolutely no reason why, after buying Outbreak Undead, you wouldn't be able to run a perfectly fine zombie one-off or even a campaign. There's so much in this that you could use. So I do recommend you give it a look. I have no doubt it's available on DriveThruRPG, and if it is, I will post a link to it below in the video description. And thank you very much for watching.